welcome back to my channel. I'm joined tonight by the usual suspects, Jordan and Manas, to discuss chapter 5 of the Gospel of Luke. We're using the King James Version. Before we get into it, I wanted to offer just a morsel of an answer. I don't think it's going to be satisfactory for Manas. Last time, Manas, I don't know if you remember, but you asked me, you're like, I can't remember what metaphysical rabbit trail we were following, but you kept coming back around to the concepts of free will. That seems to be a bit of a hyperfixation. And I mean that in a positive sense. I used to be hyperfixated on it as well. But the other thing that you were leaving me to ponder, and I didn't think I really had given you a satisfactory answer, is why God creates reality at all. And I was like maybe for aesthetic enjoyment. And that was kind of just like off the top of my head without researching it. I didn't do a deep dive, but that's kind of the answer. And if you go here to our notes, I don't know if Jordan can pull this up just a little bit before chapter 5. I did a quick Google search on this, and Google's got this I've been using this Google summarization AI, and it just pulls out. I found it's been pretty effective lately. But to address the question that you brought up, Manas, here are some Bible verses about why God created the world. A lot of it centers around for the sake of his glory or because of his glory. Also because he enjoyed it, an abundance of love. An instance of this is Isaiah 43:7, created for my glory. Romans 11:36, to him be the glory forever. Amen. Psalm 19:1, creation is God's great work of art and an indication of his love. So that goes into the aesthetic idea that creation is a divine masterpiece. So it would be a little bit like trying to answer why John Coltrane or Van Gogh or whatever creates the art that they do. I mean, Manas is an artist. Could you explain why you make art?
Uh, well, part of it is kind of like for selfish reasons, just to enjoy the act of creation, and to feel satisfaction at what's been created, whether that's listening to something I'm playing on an instrument and just, well, I mean, that could also be related to feeling pleasure from the actual sounds of what's being created. But I think it's more than just, listening to music, creating it. You're also listening to it. You get to enjoy that, but you're also kind of feeling some satisfaction for, um, you know, there's also the element of skill involved with musicianship. So that would be different than I think God, who would have absolute command over what they're creating. But for example, writing a poem, and maybe to express some kind of idea or get something out of me. Um, so I think those would be the reasons.
I think it's interesting to think about, and I want Jordan to chime in on this issue too. Um, why did God have to make it have a material component? Why couldn't he have allowed the creation to merely go on in his divine imagination and execute his vision there and reap the aesthetic enjoyment from that? Why? And I'm not trying to question or be annoying in this, but why use the medium of physical reality to express your artistic impulse when you could have done it in the imagination? Which then I think if I can anticipate what Jordan may say, perhaps he did, right? Perhaps this is all in his
Oh, I
imagination
don't
or
know.
something like that. Like perhaps all of reality is in God's mind. And so what I'm thinking this material is actually part of God's imagination.
Maybe what comes to mind for me, and I don't know that I have an answer to the question completely, but to experience your sensory things,
Mm-hmm.
like when I think about why I might want to be in a body, it's to enjoy the tactile experience, to enjoy the like touch and taste and smell, which smell is super interesting because it doesn't, when you have false memories and things like that, they don't have smell usually associated with them. It's a really physical, and maybe I'm not using the word physical right, but it's a very, it seems of the earth game, of the material reality game in a way that isn't present in the ethereal. So I think there's aspects of experience that come along with materiality. And also something I've changed a lot on. I think earlier I would have felt that the material was kind of more evil and something to be escaped from. Now I see it as a beautiful expression of divinity. Not and that's, yeah, like it's not something that's bad or evil. It's a way that God source is able to express its creativity.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic answer. I think our views on materiality and the body are going to change a lot through reading the Bible.
Okay.
I mean, as I've grown a little bit more sympathetic to the Gnostic worldview, I've become a little bit more oppositional to the material reality in the body. But
I think we've moved in opposite
yeah,
directions and maybe arrived at the middle, because I think previously it was more, a lot of the Gnostic traditions is about like how the material body is a prison.
Yep.
I don't necessarily, I mean, some of that may be true, but I'm not so pessimistic about it.
Yeah, I hear you.
All
right,
would they also say that the material world is a prison by extension?
Yeah, that's kind of the Gnostic idea, that the material world is a matrix. This is the darker, the less enjoyable view of reality, is that it's sort of a bastard creation of a demiurge rather than the work of a transcendent good God, who I think Gnostics would argue would not, for the sake of artistic creation, build evil into his work of art. But then there's the whole argument is like, can you have a work of art if it doesn't have shadows and contrast? Okay, like, I don't know. I mean, it's an interest. This is some deep stuff, and we're kind of getting away from biblical exegesis. But it's like, is it fair for God to use human souls to be the canvas of His creation? Is that like, when I make music or paint or something like that, presumably I'm not causing anybody pain and suffering by doing that. So this analogy doesn't, it has its pitfalls. So anyhow, but this is a book. This is like a book and a life's work to address. And it's really getting into the problem of evil. So that's going to get into Monas's fixations of free will. And we've got to look into Jesus and the fisherman. So let's look at that today. Okay. If we can go back to the, so this, I was telling Jordan earlier, this didn't take as long for me to put together some notes on, although that doesn't mean that I'm going to explain everything perfectly today. You could write a whole book about each chapter. But I think it was straightforward compared to the previous ones we've done. So let's get into it. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of, pardon my pronunciation, Gennesaret, and saw 2 ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. That's pretty cool. I thought it was some pretty cool imagery. I hadn't kind of thought of Jesus preaching from a boat. I kind of like that idea. And that foreshadows all sorts of things, I imagine, or harkens back. Now, when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. And when they had done this, and when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. So I'll stop there for a second. You guys may have had some commentary from the first 7 verses that I thought were pretty self-explanatory. But what I thought was really interesting here, we're getting the Simon Peter character. I suppose this is the Peter that Christ is going to build his church upon, the foundation stone of the Catholic Church, Catholics claim. And he says, depart from me, for I am a sinful man. He doesn't go, oh, awesome. Like, it's not like meeting a celebrity. Like, oh, dude, I met Mel Gibson at the 7-Eleven and he helped pump my deflated tire up. This guy's like, I am not worthy. I've got to leave. I'm so sinful. I can't be in your presence because you're so pure. And I think that's kind of interesting. Like, that seems kind of to be a counterintuitive reaction to encountering the Messiah. Like, I think in some way it kind of speaks to maybe the authenticity of the encounter. Like, if I was to write this, like as a fiction writer, I think I'd write it more like the Mel Gibson. I met Mel Gibson at the 7-Eleven, y'all. It was amazing. And this guy's like, oh, I got to get out of here. Like, I'm sensing my sin and my unworthiness just by emanating from you because you're clearly the Son of God. I just thought it was interesting. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds believable though. It doesn't sound like that odd. It just sounds like he was humbled, and that very quickly that's expressed, um, just falling down at his knees.
Did anything catch your attention, Jordan?
It reminds me of how the demons knew who he was.
Yeah. Like, some entities, some people can just sense it or have foreknowledge of it.
It also shows it doesn't require one to be a perfected human or even close to be able to recognize truth and light.
Definitely. That's a good point. Well, I mean, if you had to wait to be a perfected human to recognize truth, nobody would.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it says that there's some consciousness of the truth that's still in us, or some capacity for it that's latent, that is waiting to be activated.
Perhaps it expands over time.
No, I think so. Verse 9, for he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. So James and John, these are cousins, are typically thought to be cousins of Jesus. But what's so interesting here, and I think Jordan can say a lot more about it, is, with this catching the draught of fishes, saying, I'm going to make you fishers of men. This is clear astrological symbolism. Like, Christianity is very much associated with the symbol of Pisces. And Jordan and I really appreciate the works of Carl Jung. He talks a lot about the Piscean age being an age of duality. The sign of Pisces has 2 fishes. Carl Jung interprets this to be the Christ and the Antichrist figure coming together.
Sure.
And then that sets up the stage of Aquarius along the chronology of time. This isn't biblically speaking, but just you can understand why so many people associate the fish with Christ and the astrological sign of Pisces.
Yeah,
Do you want to say? Do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you know more about astrology than anyone I know.
it's obviously a common motif. You see it on cars everywhere. It's inescapable. It's been a while since I've taken an astrological course, but what stuck with me is Pisces. Yes, there's the duality, and Jung gets very deeply into it representing the Christ and the Antichrist. But Piscean energy also is very dissolving. It's like it's kind of a dissolution. I'm not sure I can articulate that better now without
Yeah, you'd have to go back into
reading it
Yeah.
again. But it's almost this deconstruction or letting go of a specific form. Like it's very soupy.
I trust you. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know more than me.
This is not an astrology class. We could consult the astrology notes, but that would be a detour.
What's so interesting is that recently, like,
Let me see.
they said I think last week they dug up like an inscription in Israel,
Oh yeah.
like I don't know if it's a fresco or whatever it was, and it had written in Greek or written in Hebrew, I guess, Jesus is Lord on it, and it had two fishes in the center of it. It's clearly, to me, it seemed to be very archetypal, delivered up from the collective unconscious. This because it was in the middle of this mandala, and we've been talking a lot about the, Trump talking about the golden age and its connection to Saturn moving into Aquarius and how that supposedly happened recently. It's all very interesting. So the Aquarian age would supplant the Piscean age. What do you got on Pisces there?
From our chart from the project we did, it says inner world, the transition to the original undifferentiated state.
Ooh.
That's kind of what I was trying to describe by dissolving.
Yeah.
So it's the movement from the individuated being almost back to this quote says undifferentiated state, but more like that collective. And I would almost conjecture like like coming back together with all that is with God, which is sort of the life path. The story of Jesus is coming into that state of unification with God while in a physical body.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think I typed up some of that from the Penguin Dictionary of Symbols, so it's not exhaustive, that quotation.
Well, that's a really good
it's my
one.
shorthand.
Yes, that is what that is from.
Yeah. Anyway, do you have any experience with Piscean imagery there, Manas?
I don't know much about the zodiac, honestly, or astrology, like all of the symbols. I'm interested in the people that I meet that know about it. I always enjoy listening to them explain things or kind of do like tarot card readings and things like that relate to um, what they see as attributes in different systems of signs and things like that. But I don't know enough myself to know how it relates to the stars and all of that. That would be a lot.
Yeah. The Bible seems to be a little schizophrenic. I don't mean to say this in a derogatory way. A little paradoxical, seemingly paradoxical, but not necessarily paradoxical. An apparent paradox, as Kierkegaard would say, because there's a lot of the Old Testament that decries the practice of astrology as being an art form taught to man by the fallen angels in their rebellion. We specifically learn about that in Enoch if you go into the extra biblical texts. But the New Testament is pretty rich with astrological symbolism. I mean, you don't really have to think too hard about it in terms of the birth of Christ. The Star of Bethlehem leads Zoroastrian king priests to him, and they had they were going off of astrological knowledge. So I think it's an interesting question about how astrology works together with the New Testament. I know there are a lot of people who are hardcore Bible believers that would be really upset with me saying that, but it's pretty undeniable. Plus, there's lots of star imagery in the book of Revelation that's important to know where we are on the timeline. So let's go further here, unless Jordan wants to add something else.
No, I think that's good for now.
Okay. 11. And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. And it came to pass, when he was in a certain city, behold, a man full of leprosy, who, seeing Jesus, fell on his face and besought him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And he put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will be thou clean. And immediately the leprosy departed from him. And he charged him to tell no man, but go and show thyself to the priest, and offer for thy cleansing according as Moses commanded, for a testimony unto them. So last chapter, we saw Jesus rebuke the demons that knew that he was the Christ, that knew he was he's like, hush, demons, don't tell anybody. And one of the main reasons we talked about why that didn't happen is that, there was a certain timing that Jesus wanted to sync up for his public ministry and the Passion events. Also, he didn't want demons announcing that the Christ had shown up, because they'd be bad messengers and only inspire suspicion that Christ himself was a demon. But here we have him telling someone that he healed to not tell anyone. So this is not a demon. This is a person. And it's like, okay, what's the difference? What could be possibly going on here? And a couple of them that I was able to come up with is that perhaps Christ didn't want to drum up the hysteria that he was just a wonder worker. Like he could work wonders, he could do miracles, but he didn't come to earth to do miracles in that sense. It was more about to espouse a new doctrine that's centered on breaking from old tradition into a new one and reconceiving what the Messiah was going to be and how this atonement for sin was going to work, right? So it's like he can do the miracles, and it's got to be just kind of enough to arouse the attention to make people think that this is a believable change of affairs, it seems. Other issues were that there were purity laws. He's touching a person with leprosy, and Christ doesn't go and ritualistically wash himself before he does all these things. There's certain things you're supposed to do if you interact with a leper at this time, because it's a highly contagious disease. He didn't do any of that. He doesn't need to do that because purity radiates from him, and he just cures the man. He doesn't want people knowing that he violated law, right? And that's going to cause a big hubbub. He's going to be haunted by this charge that he's violating biblical law. And he didn't want to get anybody in trouble. That's why he says, you got to do what Moses commanded, and you got to go show yourself to the priest. But you don't need to mention the fact that I didn't do any of this ritualistic cleansing and following all the other steps. Like, we'll let them assume. I'm putting words into this, but I think the idea is we're letting them assume that all that purification happened. So, yeah, I think that might be why he didn't want him to tell anyone. I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons the Bible doesn't explicitly say. Maybe it does in other synoptic gospels, but not here in Luke.
Yeah. There also is a theme of empowering humans and seemingly a reservation of doing things in a way that invites others to assume like he's going to fix all their problems.
I think I know what you mean. Can you expand on that a little bit? I think I know what you mean.
Like, his mission is, as you said, bigger than healing a single man.
Right.
It's to usher in an expansion of consciousness to demonstrate unification with God while in the body. And at different points, he says that other humans will be capable of doing these things.
Right. And I think covered by what you're saying is also, and this is a potential rub also,
Okay.
is to do away with sin consciousness as well. That's what the Bible says, but then he's also going to you're right, like ultimately to atone for the fall. But I'm not saying you're wrong about the expansion of consciousness. I think you kind of have to have that lifted in some ways to have the expansion. But maybe that's
yeah, I'm not prepared to get into.
Yeah, we've come up against this issue, other times.
Yeah. But nonetheless, you can't get as much done if you have a line around the block.
Yeah.
People demanding that you individually bestow blessings on them.
Yeah. Well,
one has to work more efficiently.
Yeah. Well, we'll see later here in this chapter that that's a real issue.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously these people weren't very good at keeping a secret because the renown spread out all over. Do you want to say anything about this, Monis, before I go to the next passage?
Not really. Just got me thinking about if him realizing he would be in such great demand had anything to do with his fate of being allowing himself to be crucified.
Oh yeah, I mean when there's the magnification of that sort of individual underneath the Roman Empire, also as a threat to the priest system of the established Judaism of that time, right? Like if everyone's going directly to Christ, who's going to go to the synagogues? Who's going to, do all the established laws and rituals? I mean, it's like with anything, right? It's the establishment, and it's been like that for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And when somebody with a new idea comes along, it's very disruptive. And there's like lots of practical considerations. There's like, is this going to destabilize the nation state? Is this going to destabilize the religious communities? And I think both the priest class of that time period and also the political class recognized that what Jesus was doing was radically disruptive.
Well, it would be today too.
It still is radically disruptive. This is the interesting thing, is that the most anti-authoritarian thing you can be as a Christian in some ways. And make of that what you will. If I mean, because it ultimately it's a condemnation of all established entities. It's not necessarily pro democracy. It's not pro any other system of government that I can think of off the top of my head. It's not pro any religious institution that currently exists. Some people go, oh, well, what about all these different Protestant denominations and the Catholic Church? No, not if you really take what the Bible says seriously.
Yeah.
In my opinion, should be careful what I say. I give myself.
I don't think anyone watching this assumes we are all experts.
Yeah, but yeah. Okay, should we move on?
Sure.
Okay. Where was I at? 15. But so much the more went there a fame abroad of him, and great multitudes came together to hear and to be healed by him of their infirmities. And he withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. And it came to pass on a certain day, as he was teaching, that there were Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by, the intelligentsia, the elites, right? Here we go. Which were come out of every town of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was present to heal them. I don't get the sense that the Pharisees and the doctors of the law were interested in being healed. I think they were there to judge, ensnare, document this crazy person, right? And behold, men brought in a bed a man which was taken with a palsy, and they sought means to bring him in and to lay him before him. And when they could not find by what way they might bring him in because of the multitude, they went upon the housetop and let him down through the tiling with his couch into the midst before Jesus. And when he saw their faith, he said unto him, Man, thy sins are forgiven thee. Okay, that's a big deal because it's not talking about I'm going to heal your body. Like Christ is saying, I'm going to forgive your sins, right? This isn't like commuting like a prison sentence in like a political kind of sense, right? Like this is like, I'm going to exonerate you from the genetic transmission of the fall right now. And so with that, that's like super interesting because for so many reasons, because essentially Christ is announcing that he is the Messiah here by saying that. He's saying, I'm going to forgive your sins. Only God can do that. So we can try to do that. We can try to forgive ourselves for the guilt and sinful things that we've done over our lives, but I'm not really optimistic that we can really do that. You guys may disagree, but the other thing here is like, why is he speaking to the man's soul? And this could be, why doesn't he just say, "Hey, I'm going to fix you. I'm going to heal your body"? Is that the man could actually be in greater concern for his soul, and Jesus, not temporarily pauses being the great physician and says and reads his heart instead and says, "Okay, this guy needs to know that the real thing that you need cured is your sin nature, and I'm going to do that for you." And this old man that's been brought in with the palsy, we don't know exactly how he got the palsy, but maybe something about I don't know how you get palsy. I don't know exactly what they're talking about here, but if it's like cerebral palsy or what. But perhaps there was something about his former life where he did sinful things that brought this on, and Jesus knew that and was trying to comfort him while he healed his body too. So I think those are things to take into consideration. Do you guys want to keep going, or do you want to talk about that for a second?
We can keep going or either one, but I'm just curious um, how it progresses here.
Yeah, let's get into it. We'll have time to talk about it all. But when Jesus perceived their thoughts, oh wait, did I jump ahead? Here we go, 21. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this which speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? So they're like, are you saying what we think you're saying? Because if you are, you're that's a big no-no. You're saying that you're God. But when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answering said unto them, What reason ye in your hearts? Whether is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Rise up and walk? I think what Christ is trying to say here is that he's not just saying vain words. I think what he's trying to say here is they're both equally easy for me to do. I can make this claim that I'm God and can forgive sins, and I can also make a man with palsy walk just like that. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power upon earth to forgive sins, he said unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, arise and take up thy couch and go into thine house. This phrase here, Son of Man, comes up a great deal. This is Christ's attempt to identify himself with humanity, but at the same time being God incarnate. So, and immediately he rose up before them and took up that whereon he lay and departed to his own house, glorifying God. And they were all amazed, and they glorified God and were filled with fear, saying, We have seen strange things today. I like that. I like when the Bible uses the word strange. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But no, I just like it. It's like the Bible's like super paranormal. I love it. It's like Stranger Things. Like it's kind of gives you goosebumps, you know? And after these things, he went forth and saw a publican. Remember, publicans are tax collectors, named Levi, sitting at the receipt of custom. And he said unto him, follow me. Now, Levi, you guys may have noticed that like these people have like two names. Sometimes like we saw Peter was Simon Peter. Well, Levi, I learned, is Matthew, because I knew Matthew was the apostle that was a tax collector, but I didn't know that it's Matthew Levi or Levi Matthew or whatever. So he has two names. So if you know a Levi, he's a Matthew. And he left all, rose up, and followed him. And Levi made him a great feast in his own house. And there was a great company of publicans and of others that sat down with him. But their scribes and Pharisees murmured against his disciples, saying, why do ye eat and drink with publicans and sinners? You know, we still have this PR problem with publicans because they're the one we looked at last, maybe two studies ago, that the tax collectors were abusing their positions of power. And Jesus didn't have a problem with people who were tax collectors. It's the abuse of their power. Same deal with soldiers. So you can be a soldier and be a Christian, and you can be a tax collector and be a Christian. Contrary to,
but can you be Jesus and be a tax collector?
I think he's.
You
could be a carpenter. You could be Jesus and be a carpenter.
I know.
Yeah. I if he wanted to be, I guess he could.
Okay.
Probably not the best vehicle for his message. And Jesus answering said unto them, they that are whole need not a physician, but they that are sick. That's some wisdom right there. That's some fire wisdom. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So this is a big thing. Like people go, oh, Christianity is so like righteous and so stuck up and da 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 da. It's like, no. Jesus like, I'm here for the sick people. I don't care. He does care, but he's like, because people who are so virtuous are like imprisoned in their pride, which is a sin as well. They can't even see that they're sinful. But like, this is pretty cool. He's like, yeah, I'm here to fix the broken people, not the well-to-do good people that don't think they have anything to learn. And they said unto him, why do the disciples of John fast often and make prayers, and likewise the disciples of the Pharisees, but thine eat and drink? And he said unto them, can ye make the children of the bride chamber fast while the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then shall they fast in those days. So it's like, why is he going to make the people that are following him while he's on earth practice abstinence and like self-denial and things like that? Because like, it's like plot twist, like I'm not going to be here for very much longer. You'll have plenty of time to be persecuted and suffer, like enjoy me while you have me, right? That's the idea, which Christ clearly understands what's going to happen to him. And he spake also a parable unto them. No man putteth a piece of a new garment upon an old. If otherwise, then both the new maketh a rent, and the piece that was taken out of the new agreeth not with the old. So we're getting something about how the old ways and the new ways don't go together. The old ways, it's something radical is happening here. You can't sew new cloth into a garment and expect it to like hold together and be a successful piece of clothing.
Well, and visually, it's like you're trying to cover up something old with like an exterior of something new instead of transforming the actual thing.
Yeah. Need like a whole new jacket. And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine will burst the bottles and be spilled, and the bottles shall perish. But new wine must be put into new bottles, and both are preserved. So I think what he's trying to say here is the scribes and the Pharisees are filled with the old teaching, and if he tries to put the new teaching into these old bottles with this old wine, it's going to explode the bottles. So just empty it. You keep that. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, if you take this saying to its conclusion, it raises some interesting questions. Like, can people who have been indoctrinated with the old system truly get the new system? But he's kind of like saying you got to like completely start over and become a new vessel and filled with new types of wine, new blood. Wine and blood are very much associated with one another, especially with the sacraments, right? No man also having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, for he saith, the old is better. So that is chapter 5 of the Gospel of Luke.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to sit with the end, I think, a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I totally grok it.
I mean, I think the interesting question is, so Jesus is not like this perfect philosopher, though he could be if he wanted to. We've seen these, like he goes into the synagogues and he like runs circles around the rabbis.
He has all these skill sets.
He has the skill set. He's talking in parables. So why is Jesus speaking in parables? Because like we got to here at the end of the chapter, if we really were to pick apart the parable, like would it retain its essence, right? Could we like twist this in such a way where like or is it going to break down like other analogies? The typical saw about all this is that Jesus spoke in parables because he wasn't trying to speak to the elite, and he was trying to speak to the common man, and that the common man, like his life is built more on folk wisdom, and so he spoke in folk wisdom so he could grasp it. He didn't do like hardcore, super precise theology, because that's not who he was. As he said earlier, he's not coming for those people. He's coming for the downtrodden, the sick. He's not coming to give lectures at Harvard,
Sure. Yeah. It feels like there's several layers or several levels of consciousness that these parables
Oh, for sure.
speak to.
For sure. That's another reason why I think the parables are awesome, is like you go back to them multiple times and they mean something different, because your consciousness has changed and you're grasping it on a different level each time.
Yeah. Strangely, all the talk about the wine makes me think of Faust, that crazy
that scene
version we saw. Yeah, there's like wine,
that Czechoslovakian or that
floating everywhere.
Yeah.
Is that a movie?
Yeah, there. I was doing some presentations and had to on Jung and Schiller and Goethe. It's great. It's on YouTube. There was this experimental film version of Goethe's Faust that I believe was a joint operation between the UK, the US, and the Czech Republic, and it's super surreal. It's not linear. It doesn't go through all of Faust 1 and then all of Faust 2, but it involves like a lot of puppets and claymation, and
I enjoyed it.
It was super surreal. It's on YouTube. I think Kino did it. Kino. If Kino Faust. I think it was made in the early 90s.
Yeah, but there's part of it where I want to go back and watch that scene, because I'm curious now how surely aspects of it are referencing biblical.
Oh yeah, there's tons of biblical references. Symbols. Yeah. What did you think about this chapter, Manas?
Yeah, so it seems to like I don't know if it's introducing for the first time, but talking about, seems like a very important part of the Bible here is Jesus forgiving sin. You mentioned something about genetic sin? What do you mean by that?
Well, just that. I have a feeling I'm going to have to do some sort of prelude to the next time we get together to talk about what the genetic transmission of sin is. Right? It's the I mean I'm not super prepared to define it, but just basically it's the idea that when Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden for their disobeying the commandment not to eat of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that the whole world fell into sin as a result of their transgression. And this means the human body and physical reality itself fell. And so as the creation propagates itself uh, genetically through reproduction, the change that occurred in the bodies of Adam and Eve gets passed down to each one of us because they are our common ancestors.
Yeah.
This is the way the Bible talks about it, and it's not uncontroversial because there's some talk about races being outside of the garden. It's a whole other issue, but the idea is that we are still paying for the transgression of our great times a thousand grandparents.
Well, I obviously think of it spiritually, but you could talk about it as epigenetic trauma.
Yeah.
I think that's a decent, but
Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought with precision about how to talk about it.
yeah.
I know it's passed down through reproduction.
Yeah, when I do,
I think it's in our DNA. I think our DNA
yeah.
got scrambled and then passed on. It gets passed on that way. I mean, doesn't say that in the Bible, but
Yeah.
given what we know about DNA and how people are made, it seems like there was something altered in the genome.
That's what epigenetic trauma means.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I guess it does.
Yeah.
Like, because a trauma happens, it alters the genome, and then it gets like this is like there's generational curses too in the Bible, which I guess is something different.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe a more like folky way of talking about that phenomena. A more like scientific way would be like calling it like epigenetic trauma. In energy healing practices, like there's often a piece of it or a portion of it that's around ancestral wounds or trauma or whatever, which is distinct from like the individual soul's karma. You know, I'm speaking very off.
Yeah.
Christian. I mean, there's Christian tradition. Like there are some offshoots of Christianity that do these things and believe these things, but this language is probably more shamanistic or, you know.
Well, the AI is telling me that sin is not inherited. I'm going to have to. I got it. Now the internet is now the internet. Yeah.
Really, you have to define that.
Yeah.
First.
The internet.
And then my other question is that, like, it seems like this chapter definitely introduces Jesus being someone that certainly can, or it's his mission to forgive people for their sins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you're assuming genetic sin being there and all of the descendants in the Bible of Adam and Eve, then did Jesus, as of the appearance of Jesus, did he remove all of that from those descendants in your view, Luke?
This is I'm speaking way above my pay grade right now. I mean, I don't have as much confidence as I did in the genetic transmission of sin as now. I'm pulling up the top 15 searches on Google here, but I mean, clearly people still sin in some respect, and even after they've been saved by a belief in Christ, people still
miss the mark.
Still mess up.
Yeah,
like Christians are not perfect people. They clearly have lapses in judgment and give in to their instincts and desires and stuff like that. I think the idea is that the sin is forgiven in this life so that you can participate in the next, whatever the next is, so that you can be perfected.
Yeah, I need a definition of that.
All right. I gotta dig into
not in a rude way.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for this, but I think the idea is that the sin is forgiven ultimately so that you can enter into heaven
Well,
or enter into the new earth.
it sounds like freeing people from patterns that either preceded them or have been running them.
But it doesn't end. It's not like a magic thing where like completely all the
Yeah,
patterns
I
and
didn't
all the
say
sin.
that,
No,
but,
no, I
like,
didn't think you did. But
yeah.
I don't want to mislead people and think like, oh, I'll just never sin again if I become a Christian. That's not how it works.
No, but it can be really difficult to change one's trajectory if you're also holding on to
Sure,
like all
Sure.
of the missteps
sure.
of your past,
Yeah.
of your family's past.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me. Like it's a lightening of that load.
Yeah. I will say from personal experience, it is easier. Like I think about my proclivity for sin pre and post encounter with Christianity. It is easier for me to do the right thing now and to sin less, but I'm still a sinful person. I still commit sin.
You're not perfect.
Yeah. But but that may not, I may be conflating two issues about like personal flaws and foibles with like the general sort of expunging of sin that metaphysically or whatever.
These are big concepts.
These are big things. I wasn't prepared for it. So take everything I said about the transmission of sin
Good job, Monis.
with a grain of salt. I gotta do some homework for next time. And I'll have it all figured out by then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I also wanted to ask, I mean, something that you were kind of talking about before we began going through the verses about God as a artist, and that being one of the verses somewhere in the Bible of and to answer the question, why did God create the world? So I was wondering, like, to think of God as all powerful, as the one that created the world, that seems like that's easier to make sense. But all good, all benevolent, that seems harder to understand. And how does, I think you kind of talked about it a little bit, when it seems like in individuals' lives there's harm, even irrespective of their own actions or sin or whatever. People, experience disease and things that they didn't bring upon themselves, really, that causes them harm, or all kinds of random uh, events that lead to suffering or death. So, um, God being all benevolent, how does that kind of come into how does that kind of go along with him also being the artist?
Well, again, I'm not going to be able to give you a definitive answer
Like,
on
which
this.
is the higher priority, you could say?
Well, I don't. I know all the landmines I'm going to step on here trying to answer this.
There's a lot of competing perspectives.
Yeah, there is. What I would say is, it may seem like God is not omnibenevolent from our limited perspective if we see disease and death in his quote unquote masterwork, right? But the actual state of things may be such that the way that he set things up, endowing us with free will, et cetera, if he did endow us with free will, free choice, whatever you want to call it, that even all these things are part of humanity. He is working through history to redeem all humanity, and I don't want to say doing the best that he can to redeem humanity, to restore it to that original state, because it makes it sound like God is not uh, all powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like he's restricted, but there may be. It raises an interesting question if he set up certain rules of reality that even he has to respect, like in the creation of this masterwork that he's made. He's like, okay, I'm going to make this thing. This is the medium I'm going to make it in. This is my great work of art. But you know, if I'm going to make the ultimate masterpiece, I'm going to have to endow it with free will,
Gotta break a few eggs.
there's going to be some bumpiness along the way. It's like, I'm trying to think, like when I made music, if I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a song, but I'm gonna do it in Pro Tools, right? And there's gonna be certain limitations when I make that choice to make my little creation on a computer, right? And there are certain things I have to respect about it. It's like, is God's power done violence if he respects the parameters that he set for himself at the outset of the creation? This is like the old question, like, can God make a boulder so heavy that even he can't lift it? It's kind of like, it's like a permutation of that.
Yeah.
And also, I'm wondering, is like the creation, is it kind of like the one and only creation, or is it kind of like an etch a sketch for God, where God can just play with it and
That's a big question. Well, clearly, I mean, Earth is not the only aspect of creation, right? So we're also judging it by not witnessing hell and not witnessing heaven and not witnessing realms beyond the veil or beyond the first layer of the firmament or whatever. So,
or even Antarctica.
Yeah, or even Antarctica. Like, we're not really seeing
the big picture.
We're clearly not seeing the big picture. But clearly, God can do etch-a-sketch things. Like if he wants to shake it up, like you could say that the flood is kind of like one of those etch-a-sketch moments. If God's the artist, right? Is it a dynamic work of art where he's like, I'm drawing a dinosaur, and now I'm drawing a Model A, and like he's got to shake it up to do that and reset it.
There's a lot of cosmological questions baked in here, like
other worlds.
Also, like what layer of creation did like the highest God create? What did his creations create? So on is kind of, we're not really talking about. But what you said first resonated with me. From our perspective, things could seem malevolent or malefic, excuse me. But from a higher state of consciousness, it might look totally different. Like we're judging these things through our subjective lens, and there's no real way to validate or invalidate that. That's what stuck out to me the most. Yep. Rudolph Otto, I feel off memory, writes a lot about this, about how the numinous, the spiritual, encompasses all that is in a very non-judgmental way. When we start to insert human language into it and human concepts into it, we are bringing it kind of away from its divine truth, and we're bringing it more into like human philosophy and bringing in judgments that may not exist on an ethereal level at all.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of sounds like it's directly related to the story of good and evil being eaten, the fruit of it, and then maybe stepping down from a divine understanding, which doesn't think in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of still sounds like we're saying that to not think in good and evil is still better than, like, there's still a sense of good to being non-judgmental, or
yeah, that's a very interesting
there's still
observation.
some value we're attaching, I think.
Sure.
But yeah,
that's a great observation, Monis, because I mean, that's a whole study. You're trying to be like, what is knowledge of good and evil? But it's like you're saying, there's like a pre-consciousness that understands the unity of air quotes good and air quotes evil, and it's this false consciousness, this false enlightenment that gets troubled with all these different bifurcations and antinomies, when it's something I don't even think we can truly grasp. Outside of it, it's a different form of consciousness.
But do you think that we can grasp it? Do you think like we all have moments where we're kind of, we're not thinking in good and evil?
I think we can have ecstatic, mystical experiences that, I mean, if they're valid, I'm not sure, but I think there are times where I've been able to pierce the veil, not by doing psychedelics or anything like that, but I, in all the insanity of the world, I see God's hand at work, even in the most effed up things
Yeah.
that we think are effed up. And yeah, I can see how it's all working together.
It's hard to hold both, but I do think, to me, that's part of being human, is holding both understandings, like knowing that there's a bigger picture at play that, is beyond my conception, and also at the same time acknowledging in every moment that there are actions I can take, there are actions that are in alignment with what I think means being a good person and within my ethics for me in that moment. I think those can be compatible, but I also understand that at different points of spiritual maturity, it feels like they're mutually exclusive. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think both of you are right here. As in, it resonates with me
Mm.
what y'all are saying. That like this word perspective just comes to my mind. That from the perspective of a moral, or certain set of moral guidelines we might follow, looking through that lens, or um, certain things, when we look through that lens, our experience is completely different. How we feel about an event, how we our level of connection with the person, or a place or an environment, when we're putting on that lens of our moral evaluation. But then, like you're saying, if you take another perspective of, maybe, number one, maybe my set of moral guidelines is incorrect, or maybe there's a better one out there. That's one thing, but also maybe there's none at all that um, has ultimate value, uh, or maybe there's this higher way of looking at things, and then from that perspective, what you previously viewed as pleasant or unpleasant, or good or bad, or right or wrong, it doesn't feel the same anymore. It just loses that character and
Hmm.
experience. But holding them both at the same time, I think that's an interesting idea. I think you
Super
got.
easy to
I
do.
mean,
Pretty
I think just
challenging.
like the way we experience life, our minds, our thoughts are being replaced by thoughts, in a constant stream of moments, right? So things can change immediately. They can change very quickly in our minds. And that can change the world around us, at least from our experience. But um, I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that's very like deep or anything. It's just like, I think it's just something we all experience, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think there could be all kinds of perspectives we haven't taken yet. And so sharing our perspectives like this, it always is something I enjoy, because I can get to try on different perspectives, and
Hmm.
maybe I'll never remember them again. Maybe they'll just be like maybe I'll just
Well,
never be back to that state of mind. But in the moment,
well,
I
that's
may
why we
not be.
record it. You can go back and check the videotape. We have receipts.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great, man. I appreciate I appreciate the different angles that you come at with it. It it really is a challenge. It really is a challenge. I'm caught flat-footed often trying to put something together here. I hadn't anticipated. I rarely anticipate the questions you ask, so got to go back to the drawing board. I will have to say we're over an hour, so probably should bring this one to a close, and we'll pick this up next week if that's okay.
Well, thank you, Luke, for preparing all this, and Jordan as well, and thanks for your time.